Right now, Cody is running a whole bunch of different basic options where he doesn't necessarily have too many perfect starters, where he has his Keldeo, he has other things, and looks like Riley's going for a Getsus right away, so
Yep.
yeah, so Cody is heavily reliant on
Ooh.
items, and looks like his
Getting rid of 3 items.
yeah, so it looks like all he has left is an N, a water, and something else. But at any rate, it looks like his odds of getting out that turn 1 Archie's ace in the hole are a lot lower now.
Yes. And we see Riley draw the Pseudo Wudo, which will come down into play, as well as Grimer.
Right, Alolan Grimer. Now, it looks like even though that was a little bit of a gamble, Riley had no idea what was going to be in Cody's. Oh, and Cody just top deck a computer search? Let's see what he can do with that, because computer search we've talked about plenty of times today lets you search your deck for any one card and basically set up your combos.
Yes, it'll be very. I did not see what he got, but there are so many different plays that he could go for right now. It'll be interesting to see.
Right, and like I was saying,
Oh,
and we
there's
got an energy and an Archie,
Archie.
and there we go. So,
There you go.
hey, if you get Getsus, then you can just top deck out of it sometimes, and then set up exactly what you need. But he needs something to follow up on top of this, or else it's just it's a Blastoise, but it's not that much to go with the Blastoise, right?
Yes. So we're seeing him search his deck via Battle Compressor. Looks like he's going to put a execute as well as another Blastoise.
Right. Although he still really hasn't committed to anything. The very interesting thing about Battle Compressor is it lets you discard cards from your deck up to 3, so he can do a bunch of creative things. He could discard less than 3. He can, of his 3, discard supporters, but at any rate, he's going to be discarding a couple Execute and a Blastoise, just in case something weird happens and that in-play Blastoise gets knocked out.
Yes. Especially with his very low bench numbers right now, it's a very safe play.
Oh, and an Articuno is going down. This is another older card from Roaring Skies. We've seen this a couple times pop up. There are these things called ancient traits. They're almost like abilities, but they're permanent and they can't be stopped in any way. They're little effects that add a little bit of flavor to the card. And in Articuno's case, if it knocks out a Pokemon, it gets to draw an additional prize. So basically, that little Zero right there, there's a GX rule that requires a Oh, and it looks like he's going for the Tapu Lele. So
Sky returned.
Oh, Sky Return, yeah. So it looks like he didn't have enough for the potential knockout with that. Oh, and we're seeing Riley's special flavor in his variant of Zoroark with red cards. So Cody is forced to shuffle his hand back into his deck and draw a new hand of 4. So let's just see what he's able to pull off of that. Unfortunately, it looks like Cody hits anything off of this. And
Hit the 2 energy that he had in hand before.
yeah, so he's got a couple energy to bounce it out. And
What was a trainer's mail, it looks like? So it looks like we're going back in with a Battle Compressor.
that's right, digging through. Get to a certain point where you get everything that you need with Battle Compressor, with an Archie in place. So by playing Battle Compressor, you can do a couple additional things with the deck. The first one is get more water energy, so that you can use Propagation, Execute's ability to bring that Execute back to your hand, discard it, and so by doing that, Cody is potentially setting himself up for getting 4 more energy, or more into play this turn.
See the energy go into the discard as well as the Sycamore. Does have the superior energy retrieval in hand.
Yeah, so even if he hits nothing off this trainer's mail, he should still be okay.
Yes, I think he's doing very well. There's a rough season there that we see. Battle Compressor.
I think I see 2 rough season of Battle Compressor and a Superior, so he didn't really hit that much, but
he's going back in for another Battle Compressor.
Yeah, and so another bonus of using Battle Compressors after you really don't need too many of them is that fundamentally Pokemon is a math game, so by discarding cards you don't need, that you are increasing your chances of being able to get what you need. So in poker terms, this is discarding bad cards that you don't need so that you get better ones more likely, so you're helping yourself.
The interesting thing about the expanded format is we have Battle Compressor still. It speeds up decks like this so fast that it allows them to come back into the format where we have things like Zoroark.
Right, and that's the neat thing about the expanded format. It's black and white on, meaning sets from approximately about 2011 and after that. So, other than the water energy and the Tapu Lele, it looks like the other two Pokemon in a lot of Cody's deck is not usable in standard, but in expanded you have that option.
So we have a big splash of energy powering up two powerful Pokemon right now against just a little basic Zorua.
We've got that Tri-Edge right now, so he's going to flip 3, and he already got what he needed.
Yep.
Just rolling extra ones just for fun. A little bit of overkill, but he gets those 2 prizes off the poor little Zorua. And we've got a concession from Riley, it looks like.
On to game 2.
Wow, that was
surprising.
That was very quick, but you know, we were talking a little bit about this matchup before we got to the table. There are a lot of outs that Riley has in his list, but at the same time, Cody, just as a default, has a very strong opening with ways to get multiple prizes on the first or second turn, big attackers, and
yes.
Yeah, and Riley just needs a lot to be able to do the same, doesn't he?
But his red card does a lot of damage to Archie's Blastoise here.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, where red card can make a difference. Although not necessarily too much of one, it depends on what they draw off the 4.
Right.
And if Riley had a little bit of a better setup, he might have been able to make a big difference, because that trainer's mail that Cody played, it was nothing. Like, he would have potentially had a dead hand at that point. Now, I didn't get a catch of the 2 prizes that he drew. He might have drawn a draw supporter or a VS seeker. And they're shuffled up and ready to go back into game 2 after a very fast game 1.
Right. Looks like we have an Alolan Grimer in Riley's hand, as well as a Shaman.
That's right, and luckily Riley was 1 Pokemon off from this being a relatively mediocre start. He had the Zorua, so he's able to get his default setup if he wants, but he might want to be a little chancy with what he does.
Yes, and we do see Cody has laid down an Articuno.
Right, so he could potentially be doing the exact same
Zorua.
thing.
My apologies there.
Oh, you're good. No worries. So we've got Riley's default setup as opposed to the Etsis that he did game 1, so he's going to be getting his main Pokemon for his deck. So we didn't see it come into play last game, but Riley runs Alolan Muck from the Sun and Moon expansion. Alolan Muck has the ability Power of Alchemy that shuts off abilities of basic Pokemon in play, so that could factor in depending on whether or not Cody hits his turn 1 Archie's Ace in the Hole or not. Now, important reminder though, Blastoise, even though it is unevolved, it is still an evolution Pokemon, so even if he gets that Alolan Muck into play, it won't shut off Blastoise, unlike Garbodor that does.
But it will shut down some important cards in his deck.
Right.
So we will see the Unknowns are shut off, the Shamans are shut off, a lot of his draw support there is shut off, as well as his Executes.
Yeah, so it really just comes down to how Cody does on this Archie or not, where he needs to be able to hit the cards to get that right combination. It gets a little tricky at times, so that's why he runs a lot of stuff dedicated just to doing that.
Yes. We're seeing a Battle Compressor. It looks like we're going to go for 2 Execute, possibly. He's still debating, though. There's the Archies, and then water energy instead.
So this is interesting. By getting the water energy, what he's doing is potentially setting himself up for the ability to lower his hand down thanks to superior energy retrieval. So I don't know exactly what's in his hand, but he can pull off some pretty clever things here potentially to get down to that. And I
see a Shaman as well as the Unknown, so he does have the draw support
and there
here.
We go. There's that water energy.
See him place down the Unknown. See a Stadium.
So he has to, and he's holding out of the water energy, and I think his logic behind that is, in case that's the 1 card that he needs for his Archie, he'll be able to pull it off. But let's see what he draws off of the Shaman setup for 5. Let's him draw a new hand of 6 cards.
Do you see the VS Seeker?
I don't know if that. That might have been an Ultra Ball in his hand. So
our Battle Compressoring right now. It looks like we're going to go for Energy, Execute, and Blastoise.
Yeah. Now, one thing you can kind of notice here is that when Cody is going for Execute is a great important aspect of this deck. But generally, if you're going for the Execute, you have a little bit of luxury where you're getting those because you know it'll save you resources in the long term. You're not quite as worried about getting that turn 1 Archie's ace in the hole to skip the evolution, go straight to Blastoise.
They're really nice to have. Like, it's not a necessity, like you said, but for those Ultra Balls, great. Especially late game.
So we see him bring his hand down. We've got an Ultra Ball, is that? Okay, Propagation, there we go.
Discarding a Tapu Lele as well as the Execute.
So it looks like the only two things he's holding on to his hand at this point are a Float Stone and a VS Seeker, so the inevitable play he's going to make is set up that
Tapu Fini with a Float Stone on it.
Now, Tapu Fini didn't really factor in the last game. Tapu Fini gives you a couple additional options. With its GX attack, you can shuffle your opponent's active Pokemon back into their deck. With second attack, you're able to deal 100 damage to any one of your opponent's Pokemon in play. So
here he goes.
There we go. There's that Archie.
Here's Archie.
So he hit a couple really helpful things. I think at this point, Cody has pretty much what he needs to try this Tri-Edge. It's kind of cute, try this Tri-Edge. But at any rate, he should have a pretty good chance. Now, there is a low chance that if he goes for the Tri-Edge, there's a low chance, but a possibility that he doesn't deal enough damage to knock out this Zorua.
Right.
Because it's flipped 3 coins, and the base damage is 20, so for each heads, he deals 40 more. So if he misses all 3 of those heads, it's a 1 in 8 chance, then he's in a significantly different spot than if he hits a Tails. So there's 1, 2, and there's 3, so he takes 30 damage. And
that was an unfortunate flip.
Yeah, but if I'm Riley, I'm loving this. This is a great spot because
we have a game now.
Yeah, I mean, it really would have been way different, but at any rate, it's still going to be a lot of work for Riley to get the knockout on this, and even then, it's only going to be 1 prize.
Which is what makes this deck so wonderful, is that these 1 prize attackers versus your 2 prize attackers. Sure, you're hitting hard and heavy with all that HP, but they're taking 2 prizes whenever you get knocked out.
Yeah, and when you're able to do that, even though I don't know how much more of the non-EXs, non-GXs we're going to see out of Cody this game, but at least by getting aggressive with that non-EX that he started with at the beginning, he can afford going aggressive with GXs and EXs because Riley will have only drawn 1 prize off of the Articuno. Yes. So with 5 prizes left, Cody's like, okay, I can afford to have 3 GX Pokemon knocked out or 3 EX Pokemon knocked out. I'm okay. Although there's a possibility he might go for that Blastoise at some point.
Could. It is a nice luxury on the prize trade, I will admit.
Yeah.
See the egg. Do you have a Skyfield out, just so you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So Skyfield lets you have a larger bench than normal. The normal bench in Pokemon is 5, but with Skyfield in play, both players can have benches of up to 8 Pokemon instead of 5.
Yes, and those eggs are a luxury when it comes to that extra bench space in a Zoroark deck.
Yeah, and I bet they're feeling pretty luxurious right there. Luxurious. So we've got an N out of Riley. I'm not really sure too much about Riley's hand right now, but seems like it's going to be pretty big deal. Although before he plays his N,
he's got DC.
Yeah, that's right. You can't rush yourself too much.
And the muck is down.
Yeah, so Cody is going... Oh, well, let's see. It's like he goes straight for the knockout, but that Alolan Muck being in play is a big deal because Cody is not going to be able to use that unknown. He's not going to be able to rush in with Keldeo.
That unknown is just a liability now.
Yeah, I mean, could potentially be a cheap prize at some point, but Cody still has the core of his decks. He has Deluge to work off of. So
correct. This is in no way a washout for Cody at this point, just because of the muck.
All right, so we got superior energy retrieval, and remember, because of that power of alchemy ability. Oh,
there goes the muck.
There it goes. So it just got sniped, and you know what? I was wrong earlier. I said 100. It does 120. So that's a bigger snipe, but it makes a difference with Alolan Muck. Now Now, one little subtle thing from the last turn was that superior energy retrieval for Cody wasn't quite as good because he couldn't use propagation because
Right.
of power of alchemy.
He did have to burn a few resources off of it, but his deck runs so many resources to help him out.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Although Riley's probably thinking, well, I wish I had another Grimer or something out in place so that I'd be able to get my Power of Alchemy online quicker, but unfortunately he only runs the 1/1 line.
That's correct. We haven't seen the Sudowoodo yet.
No, and that's another way you can play around with the bench size in the game. We talked
Mhm.
about 5 being the normal, we talked about it getting bigger with Skyfield, and
Right.
then it can sometimes get smaller with Sudowoodo from Guardians Rising in its Roadblock, so Roadblock goes into play, and your opponent can only have 4 bench Pokemon, even if Skyfield is in play at the same time. We got a new hand for Riley.
We have 3 Zoroarks out on the field, 1 Zorua in the back.
Right, and at this point, Riley would probably really be wishing he had things to trade away. He only runs 2, and both of them are on his bench, so they're supplying damage, but they're not really giving him the trade ammunition that he'd really like.
We do see him play an Ultra.
That's right. He trades away the Ultra
He
Ball.
trades away the Ultra
Yeah,
Ball.
and that's not too bad of a choice. He has a pretty online setup now. He's got get rid of the Acerola too. Acerola, if he's got a damaged Pokemon in play, he can bring it back to his hand and all cards attached to it, but
Do you see?
Elio deals a bunch.
Yes, we do see a Rescue Stretcher come out, so we will probably be seeing the Grimer hit field.
Again.
So now we have a full bench of 8.
That's right, and unlike our last match that we cast, this version of Zoroark does run for Puzzle of Time, so even though he's already burnt his Rescue Stretcher, and even though he only runs a 1/1 line, that means 1 basic, 1 stage 1 of that Alolan Muck, he can still find a way to get it back at some point and frustrate Cody.
Exactly. So we see Shaman promoted. An energy attachment, potentially to the
Yeah.
Shaman.
It's a pretty
I think it's a smart move on his play here.
It's a pretty funny, subtle thing. I don't think it's going to make a difference right now, but sometimes you can choose to attach or deluge it. And while that probably doesn't make a difference in an all-water deck like this, it really can if you run something a little bit more different with a lightning energy or something like that. But we've got 3 water energy
Going to the unknown.
onto the unknown. That's a pretty buff unknown.
But we do see the second Blastoise come
That's right.
out.
And that's a pretty clever play. I can kind of... There are advantages and disadvantages about dumping all the water on the unknown, because by doing that, he isn't making his Shaman more of a liability,
Right.
and he isn't making his first Blastoise, more of a liability. But at any rate, all that water's there, and he could just farewell letter it away to get the energy back.
That's correct. See him checking out his resources right now as he's debating on what to get. Looks like it's going to be 3 energy though.
Right, and let's see, so... Again, this is going back to the theme from the last game, where you get to a certain point with your setup, and then when you're using later battle compressors or things to discard cards from your deck. Oh, and
We
it
just
looks like
see a
we just
scoop.
saw a concession.
Looks like we're going to game 3.
Seems like it.
Alright, so going into game 3, what needs to happen for one of these guys to take it?
Cody needs a turn 1 Archie. Riley wants him to not have a turn 1 Archie. Although, to make that a little more... a little deeper than just, does he get it or does he not?
Yeah.
Riley did a pretty good job by putting constant pressure that game, and even though Cody was threatening a really strong start, I mean, he did get turn 1 Archie's ace in the hole with the Blastoise. At the same time, Riley was doing things to make Cody think, to exhaust resources that he probably wanted to save, and especially getting that Alolan Muck out into play.
Exactly. That Alolan Muck, I think, was a key play because it forced him to attack it, get rid of it, because he needed it out. But it also did not allow him to take out a Zoroa before it turned into a Zoroark or anything like that.
Exactly, and one thing that he's been not necessarily doing, or maybe it hasn't presented itself yet, is Riley runs a single copy of Seismitoad EX. This card used to be the scourge of the expanded format. Now it's not really quite as popular, but still played at times. It's a card that when you attack, it deals 30 damage, prohibits your opponent from playing any items from their hand. So, doing the math, Cody plays a lot of items. It's a lot harder to do what he needs. But that hasn't shown itself yet. It could in the next game. It really just depends on what those opening 7 are.
Exactly. This will be an interesting match for sure, though.
Right, and Riley still has all of his tools from the past couple of games. He still has Getsus, he still has Red Card, although both of those can be double-edged swords, where Red Card can sometimes give better hands,
Right.
and sometimes Getsus can clear out unnecessary cards from the Archie Blastoise player's hand so that it's actually counterintuitively easier to set up that Archie's ace in the hole to go straight to the Blastoise.
Yes. All right, let's get it on. We have Zoroa for Riley and a Keldeo for Cody. The first time we've seen Keldeo in any of these matches.
That's right.
Blast from the past.
Yeah, it's a Blastoise from the past.
Haha. And we see, looks to be Wishy-Washy.
Yep, Wishy-Washy.
Washing up onto the bench.
Yep, washing up onto the bench. We got Wishy-Washy GX. It is a pretty common card in this deck. It doesn't do a whole lot with its first attack, but the main reason that people run it is because of his Blue Surge GX attack, dealing massive damage, and in particular 220 to a Zoroark GX.
And funny enough, that when that card first came out, everyone thought it was terrible. And look at it now.
Yeah,
it is 7-0.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Wishy-Washy is it starts out little, they get together, they team up, but it looks like Cody did not get his turn 1 Archie's ace in the hole in this game, so I guess Wishy-Washy is going to stay little.
But we do see the Articuno in his hand. A Tapu Fini.
Yeah, that just...
Nothing is really standing out to me that's going to help him get where he needs to be.
No, now when you're an Archie's Blastoise player, you take a look at your hand and you try to figure out, okay, well, I may have not hit what I needed this turn, but let's work off of what I need now. Now moving on to Riley, he's going for his standard turn 1 Bridget play where you search your deck for 3 Pokemon to put straight onto your bench, GXs or non-EX Pokemon, and relatively straightforward play right here, getting set up, getting everything that he needs. The Pseudo-Wudo might come into play? Tough to say.
I think it's gonna make him think it's gonna make Cody think a bit because he only has so many bench spaces and he knows he needs at least one of those bench spaces for that Blastoise.
Right, and you know what might be a really clever play here is we just saw Cody fan out a handful of basics, so unless he hits the exact combination or somehow has the right combination in his hand, then the only real out there was to bench a couple basics, but if he did that, then he would have a full bench and he can't put the Blastoise into play.
So this actually might be a very important Pseudo-Wudo.
Right. Now, for what it's worth for everybody watching, there are players with 21 match points who will advance. In 21 match points, you get 3 for a win, 1 for a tie, 0 for a loss. Anyone with a minimum of 21 goes on to the next day. So that could be anywhere from 32, 37, 40 people, who knows, just as long as they got 21 points. Both these players are already there, so you may be wondering, why are they playing this game out? Why don't they just rest after a long day of playing? Well, their goal is to win the tournament at this point. They want to win the tournament, and to do that, these points that they got today, they carry over into the next day. And so by winning more matches today, they set themselves up for a better position, and they're more likely to make top 8 of the tournament.
Yes. And it gives them a bit of a buffer.
Exactly. So you have situations where someone has a great day on the first day of the tournament and then not so good on the second day.
We've all seen it.
Yeah, that's happened to me a couple times, but because I started out good,
Yeah,
Spent day 2 doing mediocre, but the first day was good enough to carry me. So,
right.
but at any rate, both these players are doing a great job today. Who knows how things are going to go? They could just go undefeated for the rest of the tournament.
It's very interesting to see the top of the tournament right now. It is a plethora of fantastic players. Dallas has brought out so many great players this year.
Right? Hey, I think they've just brought out a lot of players. Period.
It's true. Largest regionals.
Yeah, largest regionals, one of the largest tournaments ever. So we see an unknown go onto Cody's bench, and unfortunately for him, he's still struggling to set things up just right. It looks like he's probably relying on the top card to be something real good.
Yeah. You see Riley play down the Shaman for one. It was an N.
Yeah. He's got a pretty decent setup as long as he gets a Zoroark GX into play, because
Yes.
by being able to trade, use that incredible ability, you discard a card, you draw 2, you set yourself up for better math, better odds later on down the line, discard cards you don't need, and if he hits even like 2 or 3 of the cards he needs in this combination of, say, Skyfield and double colorless energy, he could be dealing more than 150, but
See the stand-in Zoroark instead so far. Is he gonna get it?
yeah,
No.
and if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw the foul play one from Black and White too. But we've got an Ultra Ball and an Execute in his hand,
And it gets us.
and it gets us. So both players run Execute. Different applications for the propagation ability, where you just get the Execute back into your hand and essentially discard it over and over and over again. Because when that Execute goes back into your hand, the game forgets that it was in play. It's kind of a weird concept, but at any rate, you're able to repetitively use the Execute's propagation each time you discard it. So he goes for that trade.
Interesting to see that he decided to bench the another Zorua instead of trying to go for his Grimer.
Yeah. Evolving the foul play one's an interesting option, because there are advantages and disadvantages to it. On one hand, by doing that, he's guaranteed to have fewer Zoroark GX in play for the game. But on the other hand, for a single double colorless energy, he could bring that wishy-washy up, play a double colorless energy, use foul play, which lets it copy any attack. That's any attack, even GX attacks on the active Pokemon. And in that case, he would just go ahead and copy Blue Surge GX. So we seeing an unknown go away at some point.
Yes.
Looks like Cody's still struggling to set up. There's this awkward spot where with Archie's Blastoise decks, if you haven't hit your Blastoise by the first turn or two,
It's really hard to come back.
it's really hard to come back, and sometimes you're self-defeating yourself because you get multiple water energy in your discard pile, so the math gets harder and harder and harder.
Exactly. Every turn that goes by, he's probably having this sinking feeling in his stomach that this Blastoise is never coming out.
Yeah. I mean, it feels pretty good to get the turn 1 Blastoise 2 games in a row, but in the one game where he really needs it, it's just not there for him. Okay, so got a superior, and it looks like he might set up. Does that look like he?
It's Tapu Fini.
Okay, so there's a Tapu Fini. Still stuck with the roadblock. He might be able to pull this off perfectly or miss it by a single card. So he attached his energy for the turn, and oh, he's okay. So he's gonna go ahead and be a seeker for his Professor Sycamore.
Yes. Doesn't look like he drew anything that's going to really help him come out of this pickle.
No, it's a pretty tough pickle. Add those executes on top of it, and it's egg salad at this point.
Uh,
But it's not a Blastoise.
Sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles.
Yeah. Let's see. Meanwhile, Riley's running without any problem except for not a double. Looks like he's still working on that, but
Get a Hex Maniac.
mhm. So he's really struggling to find double colorless energy. That is Riley struggling to find one, but Cody still stuck in his pretty awful predicament.
No energy, no Blastoises here on both sides. We're at a stalemate until someone finds what they need. Do you see the unknown come down, filling up that last bench space? Thankfully, he'll be able to farewell letter it away. Until then, it also could blow up in his face.
Right. So Cody already didn't really have that much of a chance to set up an Archie's ace in the hole this turn, so he's not really that worried about benching the unknown. Can't farewell letter it away this turn, but perhaps next turn, assuming that Riley doesn't just X Maniac again.
Right. So it looks like we have a battle compressor while we have Cody shuffling up his card to show what he's played.
And at this point, I'm kind of perplexed about what you'd even want to discard other than, I mean, like, the difficult thing about discarding the water energy is that you aren't making as easy for it as you could if
Right.
you stuck without a Blastoise for the whole game.
And you're thinning out so much.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to realize too thin, and you could possibly deck out.
Yeah, exactly. Where there are a lot of decks we've seen all day that constantly get things back. They constantly get resources back to the point where you could say they have an infinite deck. But in
John
this
Hunt's
case,
being prime example.
yeah, exactly. But in this case, Archie's Blastoise has a certain point where it ends, and the more superior energy retrievals go down, the sooner we're going to get to that point.
Exactly.
Got another Yes Seeker for Professor Sycamore. That actually looks a lot better now, where there are multiple Ultra Balls, multiple Battle Compressor. Assuming that nothing happens to that hand, he could finally get Archie's ace in the hole.
But will it be too late is the thing.
Yeah, and even then it's not even that much of a guarantee because of Getsus. Getsus support a card that lets you look at your opponent's hand and shuffle all of their items back in, and then you draw one card for each item you shuffle back in.
Mm-hmm. That would be a dangerous card to come out next turn on Riley.
Yeah, although it is a little weird where that could potentially be a pretty good play, but it could also set up a Archie's ace in the hole if he
Do
draws
have a
it in.
DC in Riley's hand, by the way.
Okay, so now he's attacking. Now he's dealing some damage.
So we traded away that Ranger. Right now we're battle compressoring away an Acerola as well as an Execute and a Bridget.
Yeah. Now you've seen that a lot from Riley this game and the last one where he doesn't value his Acerola as much, and part of the reason why is because Cody has a strong potential to be able to score enough damage to one-shot her. In other words, deal enough damage to completely knock out a Pokemon in one hit.
Exactly. Now we see Computer Search with a propagation as well as another propagation. Absolutely love Execute. It was one of my favorite cards.
Yeah, and you know what? I've really liked it too. It sets up some incredible combos, but it also creates lots of headaches.
It was also just super unique when it came out. Like, one of the more unique abilities we've had in the game, I feel.
Oh yeah, and you know what? That's the really cool thing about the Pokemon trading card game is that some of these really bad Pokemon in the video games or in Pokemon Go that you normally can't use are not fully evolved, they don't do as much. Here they can potentially shine because of abilities. And because of abilities, you have Execute being better than lots of fully evolved Pokemon.
And look, we have the Skyfield down. We're gonna see a huge bench coming down, it looks like.
Yep, and we've got what looks to be fetching. I don't know if he's gonna play
It's
it,
your
but he's
boy
got.
Guzma.
It's my boy. It's my boy Guzma. and he's gonna. Not sure if he's gonna actually play it yet or continue to hex or something else. He has lots of good options, so
We
it's
are
really just a
hexing, I
question of what
think.
his best option is.
See the VS Seeker for the
Yep,
Hex.
and that will
And
shut off all abilities until the end of Cody's turn.
yep. As well as the knockout on that Keldeo. We're gonna promote the unknown.
Ooh,
Possibly.
yeah, and it is kind of a tough choice because if he brings up the Tapu Fini, he could potentially get knockout on the Shaman, but that's not going to happen. Instead, he's just going to be stuck without any abilities this
Mhm.
turn, stuck with the one energy attachment, and possibly leave it at that. Decides not to get anything. I think the only item he had was the Floatstone.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah, I think that basically sums it up.
yeah.
Eh.
Like I'd rather keep it in my deck so I wouldn't deck out. But I could see potential of it at the same time, but it's not very exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking at how thin the deck is right now, and I'm a little scared if I'm Cody, where that looks like it's maybe like a 10, 15 card deck. Now the only real question is Cody has everything that he needs to set up the Archie. At this point, the only question is what's the best way to do it? It walks that fine line between not decking out but having a strong turn.
And is it too late?
Could be. One neat thing that Zorak GX decks are really good at doing is they run 4 Puzzle of Time. They let you get, if you play 2 together at the same time, that's unique for cards. If you
Yes.
play 2 at the same time, you get 2 of any cards from your discard pile, bring them back to your hand. When we're looking at Hexmaniac, what that means is we could see Hexmaniac used a lot of times. So the whole deal behind Blastoise is its ability. But if it
Right.
can never use its ability, then this is not going to be a fun time for Cody.
You are a turtle on your back at that point.
Now, I think we just saw. Okay, so this may seem a little weird. You may be seeing the roadblock and be confused, but Cody used Hexmaniac last turn,
Yep.
so that shuts his own roadblock off. So
We are down to 3 cards in his deck. 3 cards, John.
3 cards.
I was Cody, I would be very scared right now.
I would just go for that knockout on the Shaman and hope I find some sort of way to win in 2 turns. I mean, this is.
See?
And that's why I played the Fighting Fury build. Adds 40 HP to basic Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Has a very bulky Tapu Fini GX. And very impressive by Cody. He was able to do all of that without any abilities. He had been attaching the energy and he got rewarded for that. But Riley's like, you know what? I'll go ahead and play my abilities and I'll keep on shutting yours off.
See the 3rd Zoroark hit the field now.
Yeah. And a good sequencing thing here by Cody, you notice that at the end of his turn he discarded one of his bench Pokemon, and the reason for that, Roadblock goes back into effect. It's a tough card to make sure that you always remember to do right, but it's something that's part of the game, and so if your opponent plays it, then you have to be able to keep that in mind so that you don't forget something and have a huge penalty issue later on.
See 3 propagations.
And 3 trades.
3 trades.
2 trades. Yeah, 3
no,
trades.
3
You're
trades.
right. Yeah, you're
3
right.
trades. 2 DCE just drawn out of that.
God.
See him going through. It looks like he went for the Hex again. Yep.
Yeah, it looks like it. Although it also looks like that Tapu Fini has over 200 HP.
Yep.
So the math here, he might potentially be able to get the knockout on it and Hexmaniac. That'd be the best case scenario. So he's got a full bench, got the Hex. The opponent can't use any abilities.
Yep.
And there we go.
There's the knockout.
And
Cody has 1 card in deck.
at this point, he has no other options. He could just be funny and deck himself out or something. And looks like got the start Kuno here.
Does have a Shaman in hand.
Yeah.
He could deck himself out.
Well, he's got a little bit more fight left in him, even with the one card, even with that, because he can put the Zorak to sleep and hope something happens.
Which we do see.
And just to that was actually. So you saw a couple things there. He Zorak upside down. That's actually confusion. But it doesn't matter one way or the other. Left to right, upside down. Regardless of the status effect, Riley's able to get out of it and take game 3.
Very interesting to see how Riley came back from this, considering we both thought that Blastoise was going to be victorious in this matchup.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an interesting thing about these decks and Pokemon in general is that you have scenarios where even though one deck may or may not be favored, it's tough to project matchups at times. There are ways where players can get around it and do what they can to play with the cards that they've got. And so because of Zorak GX being so reliable, being so good, Riley was able to set himself up in a situation where he was down a game. That can be a little bit of pressure for players, but he was able to win 2 in a row, win game 2, game 3, a match, and now he is the sole